The High Middle Ages, a time of soaring cathedrals and burgeoning trade, of crusades and scholastic inquiry. Yet, beneath the veneer of progress lay a society grappling with profound anxieties, a society where the other became a scapegoat for all that ailed it. For centuries, Jewish communities had lived amongst their Christian neighbors, their presence woven into the fabric of European society. They were merchants, scholars, artisans, integral, yet always distinct. Jewish communities maintained their own distinct religious and cultural traditions, often living in close-knit neighborhoods with their own synagogues, schools, and communal institutions. This separation, though providing a degree of autonomy, also fostered suspicion and misunderstanding among the wider Christian population. Canon law, the body of ecclesiastical legal principles, initially offered a degree of protection to Jewish communities. It forbade forced conversion and recognized their right to observe their own faith. However, this relative tolerance was eroding. Over time, subtle yet significant shifts occurred. New interpretations of canon law introduced restrictions on Jewish land ownership, limited their participation in certain professions, and mandated distinctive clothing to mark them as different. Economic tensions simmered. Jewish communities, often barred from owning land, increasingly turned to money lending. This, while providing a vital service, fueled resentment amongst Christian peasants and nobles alike, who often found themselves indebted. Droughts, famines, and outbreaks of disease ravaged the land, leaving communities desperate and vulnerable. In such times, it was all too easy to blame the outsider for their misfortunes. The Church, while officially condemning violence against Jews, often contributed to a climate of suspicion through its sermons and teachings. Fear of heresy and the perceived threat to Christian orthodoxy were powerful motivators. Wise leaders within the Jewish community recognized the shifting tides. They cautioned their people to remain observant, to avoid any actions that could be misconstrued, to weather the storm with patience and prayer. Whispers began to circulate, dark tales of secret rituals, of blasphemous practices, of unspeakable acts committed in the shadows. These rumors, often born of ignorance and fear, found fertile ground in a society primed for suspicion. And then in the year 1144, in the English city of Norwich, a young boy disappeared. His name was William. A monk named Thomas, driven by an unwavering faith and fueled by rumor, would seize upon this tragedy and weave a tale that would forever stain the pages of history. A tale of blood, sacrifice, and the darkest depths of human prejudice. The year is 1144. In the bustling market town of Norwich, England, a young boy named William disappears. Days later, his lifeless body is discovered in Mousehold Heath, a wooded area just north of the city. The discovery sends a ripple of fear and grief through the Christian community. Agnes, a friend of the family, is devastated. Rumors begin to circulate, whispers carried on the wind like seeds of doubt. Some speak of foul play, others of a tragic accident. But as days turn into weeks, a darker narrative begins to emerge, fueled by suspicion and long-held prejudices against the Jewish community, who reside in their own quarter of the city. Enter Thomas of Monmouth, a monk from the Norwich Cathedral Priory. He takes a particular interest in William's death, driven by a fervent desire to uncover the truth and perhaps to elevate the status of the local saint in the making. He begins his own investigation, meticulously gathering information and interviewing witnesses, though his methods are far from objective. Thomas selectively interprets the evidence, twisting innocent details into sinister signs. He focuses on the fact that William's body was found near the Jewish quarter. He seizes upon rumors and amplifies them, weaving a tale of secret rituals and hidden motives. Slowly, meticulously, Thomas constructs his narrative. William, he proclaims, was not merely murdered. He was a sacrifice offered by the Jews of Norwich in a gruesome reenactment of the crucifixion. Thomas claims the Jews needed Christian blood for their rituals. The Jewish community of Norwich, long established and relatively prosperous, is stunned by the accusation. They are integrated into the local economy, engaging in trade and money lending. But their very success breeds resentment, and their distinct religious practices make them easy targets for suspicion. Rabbi Aaron ben Isaac Halevi, the respected leader of the Norwich Jewish community, attempts to reason with the Christian authorities to explain the absurdity of the blood libel. He emphasizes the Jewish prohibition against consuming blood, let alone using it in rituals. But Thomas is relentless. He presents his evidence to the Bishop of Norwich and other Christian leaders, skillfully weaving his narrative of ritual murder. He appeals to their religious zeal and their fear of the other. He uses descriptions of the wounds on William's body to support the accusation. The bishop, initially skeptical, finds himself swayed by the growing fervor of the Christian population. He faces immense pressure to act, to protect his flock from what he perceives as a grave threat. Not everyone is convinced. Some, like Agnes, remember the Jewish community as peaceful neighbors, not bloodthirsty killers. They struggle to reconcile the accusations with their own experiences, but their voices are drowned out by the rising tide of hysteria. The accusations take root, fueled by existing prejudices and anxieties. The people of Norwich demand justice, baying for the blood of the accused. Violence erupts. The Jewish quarter is attacked, homes are looted, and innocent people are assaulted. The case of William of Norwich marks a turning point. It is the first documented instance of the blood libel in medieval Europe. The seeds of hatred are sown, and they will soon spread far and wide, poisoning relations between Christians and Jews for centuries to come. Thomas of Monmouth, driven by a conviction bordering on obsession, began meticulously crafting his narrative. Every detail, every whisper he had collected, was woven into a tapestry of accusation. He sought not merely to record events, but to expose what he believed to be a dark and hidden truth. He presented his account to his fellow monks, painting a vivid picture of Jewish perfidy. He spoke of secret rituals, of ancient prophecies fulfilled in the blood of the innocent William. He skillfully employed the language of religious demonization, casting the Jewish community as agents of darkness, sworn enemies of Christ. Rumors, amplified and distorted with each telling, spread like wildfire through the countryside. Whispers of a Jewish plot replaced the simple tragedy of a lost boy. Fear and suspicion, once dormant, began to fester in the hearts of the Christian population. Thomas sought to legitimize his claims by presenting them to the ecclesiastical authorities. He hoped to secure the support of the church, lending greater weight to his accusations and galvanizing action against the Jewish community. Rabbi Aaron ben Isaac Halevi, leader of the Norwich Jewish community, watched with growing apprehension as the accusations gained traction. He knew the fragility of their position, the ever-present threat of persecution that hung over them. He struggled to understand the source of this sudden, venomous hatred. Thomas, undeterred by skepticism, took his message directly to the people. He preached fiery sermons, recounting the alleged details of William's murder with theatrical intensity. He skillfully manipulated the crowd's emotions, stoking their pre-existing prejudices against the Jewish community. While Thomas's tale gained momentum in England, echoes of similar accusations began to surface across the continent. The idea of Jewish ritual murder, though previously unheard of, found fertile ground in a society rife with religious anxieties and social tensions. Though no contemporary evidence exists, later accounts alleged that Jewish representatives met at the Council of Narbonne to mandate ritual murder. This claim is false, an example of Thomas's narrative being used to justify further violence and persecution. The psychological factors at play were complex. For many, the blood libel provided a convenient explanation for the inexplicable, the death of a child, the uncertainties of life. It offered a scapegoat for societal ills, a target for pent-up frustrations and anxieties. Rabbi Aaron, faced with mounting hostility, attempted to reason with the Christian authorities. He presented arguments based on Jewish law and tradition, demonstrating the utter absurdity of the blood libel. But his pleas often fell on deaf ears, lost in the rising tide of prejudice. Thomas, convinced of his righteous cause, continued to refine and disseminate his narrative. He saw himself as a warrior for God, fighting against the forces of evil. He was driven by a deep-seated belief that the Jewish community posed an existential threat to Christian society. Word of mouth played a crucial role in the spread of the blood libel. Exaggerated tales and unsubstantiated rumors traveled from village to village, fueling suspicion and animosity towards the Jewish communities. The truth became increasingly obscured by layers of prejudice and fear. Thomas's tale, though rooted in falsehood and fueled by prejudice, had taken root. The seeds of the blood libel had been sown, and they would blossom into a harvest of hatred and persecution that would plague Jewish communities for centuries to come. The initial spark in Norwich would ignite a conflagration that would engulf much of Europe. The seed of accusation, once planted in Norwich, began to sprout tendrils that reached across England. Thomas of Monmouth, fueled by unwavering conviction, tirelessly spread his tale. The common folk, already burdened by hardship and uncertainty, found in Thomas's narrative a convenient scapegoat for their anxieties. News of the events in Norwich, carried by merchants and travelers, began to reach the ears of clergy across the continent. Not all were convinced by the accusations. Bishop Burchard of Worms, a respected jurist, viewed the claims with skepticism. Soon, similar accusations began to surface in other English towns. In Gloucester, the death of Harold, a young boy, was attributed to the Jews. Then, in Lincoln, the case of little Saint Hugh further inflamed passions. Each new accusation brought with it increased persecution and hardship for the Jewish communities. The fear was palpable, the threat of violence ever present. The contagion of the blood libel did not remain confined to England. Across the English Channel in France, whispers of ritual murder began to circulate in Paris and other cities. The narrative traveled well-worn merchant routes and via word of mouth from zealous preachers. Thomas of Monmouth visited Rouen himself and spread his beliefs. Even in Germany, where Jewish communities had enjoyed relative peace, the seeds of suspicion began to take root. But voices of reason, like Bishop Burchard of Worms, continued to challenge the veracity of the accusations. Jewish leaders like Rabbi Aaron ben Isaac Halevi struggled to defend their communities, writing letters and appealing to local authorities to protect them from the growing threat. The spread of the blood libel was fueled by a confluence of factors: religious zealotry, economic resentment, and social prejudices. It provided a convenient explanation for misfortune and a readily available target for hatred. In some cases, the accusations led to violence and expulsion. Jewish communities who had lived in these lands for centuries were forced to flee, leaving behind their homes, their livelihoods, and their heritage. The legacy of the blood libel would endure for centuries, a stain on the conscience of Europe, a testament to the destructive power of hatred and misinformation. In Worms, Germany, as whispers of the blood libel began to circulate, Rabbi Aaron ben Isaac Halevi grappled with the daunting task of safeguarding his community. He sought guidance in sacred texts, searching for wisdom to navigate the rising tide of hatred and misinformation. Across Europe, Jewish communities convened in secret, grappling with the devastating accusations. Elders debated strategies. Should they offer gifts to local lords hoping to buy protection? Should they appeal to the church for intervention? Or should they prepare for the worst, safeguarding their sacred texts and communal treasures? Rabbi Aaron, standing before his congregation, sought to instill courage. "We must remain steadfast in our faith," he urged, "and trust in God's protection. We must also demonstrate our innocence through reason and diplomacy, appealing to the conscience of those who will listen." In Worms, Rabbi Aaron sought an audience with Bishop Burchard, an influential cleric known for his sense of justice. He presented his case with meticulous detail, refuting the absurd claims of ritual murder and pleading for the bishop's intervention to protect his community. Bishop Burchard, convinced of the Jews' innocence, addressed his fellow Christian leaders. He reminded them of the Church's teachings against false accusations and urged them to resist the spread of baseless rumors and prejudice. He warned of the dangers of succumbing to mob mentality and persecuting an innocent community. Not all Christians were swayed by the lies. Agnes, a Christian woman living near the Jewish quarter, dismissed the accusations as ludicrous. She had known her Jewish neighbors for years, sharing in their joys and sorrows. She refused to believe that they were capable of such barbarity. In the quiet solitude of monasteries, some Christian scholars questioned the veracity of the blood libel. They examined the accusations through the lens of reason and logic, finding them inconsistent with Jewish law and lacking any credible evidence. Some penned letters to influential figures, urging them to exercise restraint and reject the spread of misinformation. However, voices of reason were often drowned out by the rising tide of fear and prejudice. Thomas of Monmouth continued to spread his venomous tale, traveling from town to town, fueling the flames of hatred and suspicion. In many communities, the blood libel led to violence and expulsion. Jewish families, fearing for their lives, were forced to abandon their homes and businesses, seeking refuge in other cities or countries. The trauma of these forced migrations left deep scars on the collective Jewish psyche. Despite the persecution, Jewish communities persevered. They turned to their faith for solace, finding strength in their traditions and mutual support. Prayers for deliverance echoed through synagogues, a testament to their unwavering hope for a better future. Meanwhile, Thomas of Monmouth continued to chronicle his distorted version of events, solidifying the blood libel in writing and ensuring its propagation for generations to come. His work became a dangerous weapon, fueling centuries of antisemitism and persecution. The blood libel, a monstrous lie born of ignorance and malice, had taken root. Despite the efforts of some to refute it, the accusation would continue to haunt Jewish communities for centuries, a chilling reminder of the fragility of tolerance and the enduring power of prejudice. The accusations, like a venomous plague, spread rapidly. In worms, the whispers turned to shouts, the shouts to violence. Homes were ransacked, families torn apart, and the sanctuary of the synagogue desecrated. The blood libel had claimed its first victims, leaving behind a trail of devastation and despair. The frenzy gripped entire communities. Neighbors turned against neighbors, fueled by fear and religious fervor. The accusations became a pretext for settling old scores, for seizing property, for indulging in the basest of human impulses. Innocent lives were shattered, and the bonds of society frayed under the weight of hatred. Flight became the only option for many. Families abandoned their homes, their businesses, their ancestral lands, seeking refuge in neighboring towns or distant lands. The blood libel had transformed them into wandering exiles, forever marked by the stigma of false accusation. Some found a glimmer of hope in the actions of righteous individuals. Bishop Burchard of Worms, a man of reason and compassion, intervened to protect the Jewish community, offering them sanctuary within the walls of his city. But such acts of courage were rare, and often insufficient to stem the tide of violence. Faced with the choice between conversion and death, many chose martyrdom. They clung to their faith, even in the face of unimaginable suffering, becoming symbols of resilience and defiance in the face of religious persecution. Their stories, whispered in hushed tones, became part of the collective memory of the Jewish people. The architects of the blood libel continued to spread their poisonous lies. Thomas of Monmouth, driven by his unwavering conviction, traveled from town to town, recounting his tale of William of Norwich and fueling the flames of antisemitism. His words, amplified by the anxieties of the age, found fertile ground in the hearts of those seeking a scapegoat for their troubles. Expulsions became commonplace. Jewish communities, once vibrant centers of commerce and culture, were uprooted and forced to seek refuge elsewhere. Their homes were seized, their synagogues destroyed, their very existence erased from the historical record. The blood libel had become a tool of ethnic cleansing, leaving behind a void that could never be filled. In the face of unimaginable adversity, the Jewish community clung to its traditions, its faith, and its sense of identity. They studied the Torah, observed the Sabbath, and maintained their communal bonds, finding strength in their shared heritage. The blood libel had failed to extinguish the flame of Jewish life, but it had cast a long shadow over their existence. The cemeteries became silent witnesses to the horrors of the blood libel. Row upon row of graves bore testament to the lives cut short by hatred and persecution. Each stone a silent reminder of the enduring legacy of this false accusation. Voices of reason, though few, refused to be silenced. Bishop Burchard, armed with logic and compassion, penned letters and sermons challenging the veracity of the blood libel, reminding his flock of the Christian values of love and tolerance. But his words were often drowned out by the clamor of hatred and fear. And so the cycle continued. The accusations spread, the violence erupted, and the Jewish community endured. The blood libel, a monstrous creation of fear and prejudice, had taken root in the heart of Europe, casting a long and sinister shadow that would stretch across the centuries. Yet amidst the ashes, a spark of hope remained. The Jewish people, battered but not broken, resolved to rebuild their lives, to reclaim their communities, and to preserve their heritage in the face of unrelenting adversity. The blood libel had sought to destroy them, but it had only strengthened their resolve to endure. The Church, a monolithic presence in medieval Europe, held immense sway over the lives of its adherents. Its stance on the blood libel, however, was not as straightforward as the zealots might have wished. Official pronouncements often contradicted the fervor of local accusations. Papal bulls, official edicts issued by the Pope, occasionally addressed the treatment of Jewish people. While condemning forced conversions and unwarranted violence, they rarely, if ever, explicitly endorsed the blood libel. Some even contained implicit condemnations of baseless accusations. Clerical debates raged concerning the veracity of the blood libel. Many, like Bishop Burchard of Worms, struggled to reconcile the accusations with established theological principles. The idea of Jews needing Christian blood for rituals seemed absurd, a distortion of both Christian and Jewish doctrine. Jewish scholars, such as Rabbi Aaron ben Isaac Halevi, countered the accusations with reasoned arguments based on Jewish law and tradition. They pointed out the explicit prohibition against consuming blood in Jewish dietary laws, rendering the blood libel a blatant absurdity. However, reason often fell on deaf ears. The fervor of the accusers, like Thomas of Monmouth, proved a potent force, capable of drowning out dissenting voices and manipulating popular sentiment. The Inquisition, established to combat heresy, held the power to investigate accusations of ritual murder. However, its focus primarily lay on internal Christian deviations, and its involvement in blood libel cases was often inconsistent and driven by local pressures. Sometimes, local communities would pressure the Inquisition to act upon blood libel accusations. The testimony of people like Agnes, though often based on hearsay or fueled by prejudice, could sway the inquisitor's decisions. Some clergy members, troubled by the injustice and violence sparked by these accusations, sought definitive guidance from the papacy. They hoped for a clear condemnation of the blood libel that would carry the weight of papal authority. For the Jewish communities, the Church's ambiguous stance was a source of constant anxiety. Without a clear and unwavering condemnation, they remained vulnerable to the whims of local populations and the machinations of individuals like Thomas of Monmouth. The absence of a decisive ecclesiastical condemnation allowed the blood libel to fester and spread. Individuals like Thomas of Monmouth could continue to promote their accusations with impunity, finding fertile ground in the prevailing climate of fear and prejudice. The tragedy lay in the Church's failure to decisively confront the blood libel. The silence, the ambiguity, inadvertently fueled the flames of hatred, leaving Jewish communities to suffer the consequences. The blood libel, lacking explicit condemnation from the highest levels of the Church, spread like a malignant stain across the map of Europe, a testament to the devastating consequences of religious intolerance and the manipulation of fear. The case of William of Norwich served as a catalyst, igniting a flame of accusation that would soon engulf Jewish communities across Europe. But what fueled this fire? What were the motivations that drove individuals like Thomas of Monmouth to propagate such a heinous lie? For some, religious fanaticism played a pivotal role, an unwavering, often irrational belief in the inherent evil of the other. In this case, the Jewish people blinded them to reason and fueled their willingness to believe the most outlandish accusations. Economic resentment also played a significant part. Jewish communities, often restricted from owning land, frequently engaged in trade and money lending. This economic activity, while vital to the functioning of medieval society, also bred resentment among those who were indebted to them or saw them as competitors. The perception of Jewish wealth, often exaggerated and distorted, fueled envy and resentment. Accusations of ritual murder provided a convenient pretext for seizing Jewish property and canceling debts, enriching those who stood to gain from their misfortune. Social prejudice, deeply ingrained in the medieval mindset, further exacerbated the situation. Jewish people were seen as outsiders, their customs and beliefs viewed with suspicion and distrust. This inherent prejudice made it easier to believe the worst about them, regardless of evidence. In times of social and economic stress, Jewish communities were often scapegoated for the ills of society. The blood libel provided a convenient outlet for pent-up frustrations and anxieties, allowing people to project their fears and insecurities onto a vulnerable minority. Political opportunism also played a role. Some rulers and clergy saw the blood libel as a way to consolidate their power, either by confiscating Jewish wealth or by diverting attention from their own failings. By exploiting the fears and prejudices of the populace, they could strengthen their own positions and maintain control. The blood libel became a tool for political manipulation, used to achieve specific goals and objectives. It is important to acknowledge that not everyone succumbed to the hysteria. There were voices of dissent, individuals who recognized the inherent absurdity and injustice of the blood libel. Some Christian clergy, like Bishop Burchard of Worms, spoke out against the accusations, challenging the prevailing narrative and defending the Jewish community. However, these voices were often drowned out by the clamor of the mob, the pronouncements of ambitious leaders, and the whispers of fear and prejudice. The forces arrayed against the Jewish people were simply too powerful. The psychological dimensions of antisemitism cannot be ignored. The scapegoating of Jewish people provided a psychological release for individuals struggling with their own anxieties and insecurities. By projecting their fears and frustrations onto a convenient target, they could feel a sense of control and superiority. The motivations behind the blood libel were complex and multifaceted, ranging from religious fanaticism and economic resentment to social prejudice and political opportunism. These factors, combined with the inherent human tendency to scapegoat and demonize the other, created a perfect storm of hatred and persecution that would plague Jewish communities for centuries to come. The echoes of Norwich reverberated across the continent. Though Bishop Burchard of Worms had spoken out against baseless accusations, new incidents began to surface, each a twisted echo of the last, yet molded by local fears and prejudices. France, 1171. The village of Blois was thrown into turmoil when a Christian servant girl, Agnes, accused the Jewish community of murdering a child and tossing the body into a local well. The timing coincided with Easter, fueling the already heightened religious fervor. Despite lacking any concrete evidence, the Count of Blois, Theobald V, seized upon the accusation. 31 members of the Jewish community, including women and children, were arrested and charged with ritual murder. Rabbi Aaron ben Isaac Halevi, a respected scholar, was among those imprisoned. The influence of men like Thomas of Monmouth, though not directly present in Blois, echoed in the actions of zealous clerics who fueled the flames of hatred, demanding swift and merciless justice. The absence of due process was deafening. The accused Jews of Blois were given a choice: convert to Christianity or face the stake. When they refused to renounce their faith, they were burned alive at the stake. Agnes's accusation, however flimsy, had sealed their fate. The Blois tragedy sent shockwaves through Jewish communities across Europe. Bishop Burchard of Worms, upon hearing the news, penned letters to fellow clergymen, decrying the injustice and urging them to condemn the false accusations. But his voice, though respected, was becoming increasingly isolated. Back in Worms, Rabbi Aaron ben Isaac Halevi, though spared the worst of the initial violence, witnessed the escalating fear and distrust that gripped his community. The shadow of Blois loomed large, threatening to engulf them all. In the aftermath of the tragedy in Blois, Agnes was shunned by her community, viewed by some as a tool of manipulation, by others as a misguided pawn. She would live the rest of her days in sorrow, knowing her words had caused such an atrocity. Meanwhile, in Norwich, Thomas of Monmouth continued to refine his narrative of William's martyrdom, adding new details and embellishments, solidifying the foundation upon which future accusations would be built. As the years passed, the voices of reason grew fainter. Bishop Burchard of Worms, weakened by age and disheartened by the escalating violence, succumbed to illness. His death marked a significant loss for those who sought to challenge the spread of the blood libel. Seeing the writing on the wall, Rabbi Aaron ben Isaac Halevi made the difficult decision to lead his community out of Worms, seeking refuge in a land where they might find some semblance of peace. The blood libel, like a relentless hunter, had forced them to flee their homes. And so, the seeds of hatred, sown in Norwich and watered by fear and prejudice, continued to spread across Europe, casting a long and ominous shadow over Jewish communities for centuries to come. The case studies of Norwich and Blois served as grim templates, shaping the narrative of the blood libel in countless future iterations. The blood libel, born in the crucible of medieval anxieties, did not vanish with the close of the Middle Ages. It burrowed deep into the collective consciousness, a festering wound on the body of humanity. Its enduring power lay in its adaptability, its ability to morph and resurface in new contexts, always finding a receptive audience among those predisposed to hatred and fear. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, the blood libel served as a potent weapon in the arsenal of anti-Semitism. Pogroms, fueled by false accusations of ritual murder, ravaged Jewish communities across Eastern Europe. The libel became a justification for state-sponsored persecution and mob violence, leaving a trail of devastation and despair. The infamous Bailey's trial in Tsarist Russia, 1913, stands as a stark reminder of the blood libel's destructive potential. Mendel Bailey's, a Jewish factory worker, was falsely accused of murdering a Christian boy for ritual purposes. Despite overwhelming evidence of his innocence, the trial became a platform for anti-Semitic propaganda, exposing the deep-seated prejudices within Russian society. Even the horrors of the Holocaust could not eradicate the blood libel. Nazi propaganda employed it to demonize Jewish people, portraying them as a sinister force conspiring to undermine the purity of the Aryan race. The libel became a cornerstone of Nazi ideology, justifying the systematic extermination of millions. In the digital age, the blood libel has found new life online. Internet forums, social media platforms, and extremist websites serve as breeding grounds for conspiracy theories and anti-Semitic tropes. The anonymity of the internet allows individuals to spread hate and misinformation with impunity, perpetuating the cycle of prejudice. The blood libel is not confined to the fringes of society. It occasionally surfaces in mainstream discourse, often disguised as criticism of Israeli policies or veiled references to Jewish power. Such instances serve to normalize anti-Semitic tropes and perpetuate harmful stereotypes. Jewish communities around the world have consistently condemned the blood libel and worked to combat anti-Semitism in all its forms. Remembering the past, educating future generations, and fostering interfaith dialogue are crucial steps in dismantling the structures of prejudice. Responsible Christian leaders have also played a vital role in denouncing the blood libel and promoting reconciliation between Christians and Jews. By acknowledging the Church's historical complicity in perpetuating anti-Semitism, they pave the way for a more just and equitable future. Education is a powerful tool in combating prejudice. By teaching children about the history of the blood libel and the dangers of intolerance, we can inoculate them against the virus of hate. Instilling empathy and critical thinking skills are essential for building a more inclusive society. Interfaith dialogue and collaboration are crucial for breaking down barriers and building bridges of understanding. By fostering meaningful relationships between people of different backgrounds, we can challenge stereotypes and promote mutual respect. The ghost of Thomas of Monmouth and all those who followed in his hateful path still lingers. The fight against the blood libel and the anti-Semitism it represents is far from over. Vigilance, education, and a commitment to justice are essential for ensuring that the lies of the past do not poison the future. The legacy of the blood libel serves as a stark reminder of the dangers of unchecked prejudice and the enduring power of hate, but it also offers a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the possibility of redemption. By learning from the past, we can strive to create a world where truth triumphs over lies and justice prevails over oppression. The flame of remembrance must be kept burning brightly, illuminating the path towards a more tolerant and compassionate future.